I still remember the weight of the envelope, that thunderclap of cardstock landing on our dining table like it knew it carried a future inside. The university crest was gilt, the return address in that elegant serif that made my mouth go dry. It was addressed to me, Maya Raman, 1 for B North Lane, like a hand extended. You should open it, my mother said, voice steady, eyes shiny. She fussed with a bowl of cut limes that didn't need fussing. Sunlight gathered over the table in a warm square, pollen hanging in the air like soft doubt. I will, I said. I wanted to savor the moment, the last breath before whatever news changed the shape of me. I wanted to remember the sound of our old wall clock and the smell of cilantro on my fingers and the precise angle of light on the envelope when I tore it open and my cousin Samira breezed in, flip-flop slapping, a grin that read mischief or malice depending on the hour. Ooh, she said, scooping up the envelope with 2 fingers. Fancy mail, that's Maya's, my mother said to Mild. She didn't like to police Samira, who had moved in with us 6 months earlier after Aunt Rena left to find herself in Dubai. Samira came with 2 suitcases, a glittering phone, and a laugh that sounded like a dare. Relax, Samira said, waving the envelope like a flag. I'm just kidding. I'm not a monster. I reached for it. She danced away, mock threatening to toss it like a frisbee. Finally, I took it back with a fake glare. She saluted. May luck be ever in your flavor, she said in a mangled Hunger Games reference, and moved on to raid our pantry. I took the envelope to my room. I ran my thumb under the flap, slow and ceremonial. And then, because the universe can't resist an ironic flourish, my phone rang, my after-school boss, Mr. Choi, begging me to cover an extra shift at the grocery because Jamal was sick and trucks don't unload themselves. I tucked the letter under my literature textbook safe. And texted be there in 15. I told Mom I'd open it when I got back, and she bit her lip like she was holding a wish between her teeth. I stacked cans. I felt the envelope in my pocket all through checkout even though it wasn't there. A tiny phantom weight. When I came home at 9, greasy with fluorescent light, the house was humming with the sound of some reality show from the living room. My mother was asleep on the couch, curled like a question mark. Samira sat upright with a bowl of noodles, eyes reflecting the TV. She glanced up with a bored smile. How is capitalism? She asked. I went to my room. My textbook sat on the desk. The envelope did not. I flipped pages, messy at first, then frantic, then surgical. I looked under the bed, under the chair, behind the curtain where dust bunnies told me their long, slow stories. Then I walked out, pulse thudding like a fist on wood. Did you go into my room? I asked Samira. She blinked once, innocently. Why would I go into your room? Because the envelope's gone, the Hogwarts letter? Did the owl take it back? Samira, her smile tilted. I didn't touch your stuff. Chill. I looked at my mother sleeping, her breath shallow as if even dreams were a budget she had to stretch. I swallowed my accusations and kept looking. I walked through the kitchen, the hallway, the little patch of balcony that my mother called the garden because of a single basil pot soldiering on in the heat. I opened the dustbin and saw the envelope like a bone, stiff and pale, crushed under onion skins and a wad of pink tissue paper. For a second, the world narrowed to that rectangle. A scratch on the crest, a damp edge where someone had wrung it like a cloth. It felt like my hand reached down on its own. I pulled the envelope out, heart hammering. It was empty. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood very still and felt something lift in me. Not hope, not yet. Determination has a different temperature. I smoothed the envelope with my palm and read the slit. The letter itself was gone. Samira, I said, not loud, but in a tone that made her turn her head a fraction. Where is it? She shrugged with theatrical confusion. Where's what? My letter. I told you. I didn't touch your stuff. It was in the trash, and I didn't put it there. Her eyes slid to the TV and back, like the conversation bored her already. Maybe your mom did when she was cleaning. My mother would never throw away my college letter. Maybe the wind did, she said and stood, bowl in hand. This show is getting dumb. I'm going to my room. I followed her down the hall. You took it. She turned at her door, eyes bright. Prove it. Her door shut. The lock clicked. The one my mother said was unnecessary and a little rude but had allowed because she didn't want Samira to feel unwelcome. I stared at the painted wood. Prove it. Like a dare, I knocked on Aunt Rena's number 3 times with no answer. I texted Jamal in delirious distress, and he offered to come over and help me look. But I didn't want him to see me this way, hair escaping its knot, hands smelling like soy sauce and onions, future suddenly wobbling like a tabletop with a shim knocked out. In the morning, I woke early and went to the trash again. As if the letter might have sprouted overnight like a stubborn seedling, I found a cold confetti of paper-thin strips, like the shredder had chewed something dear. I gathered the pieces and stared at the faint watermark of the university crest. My hands shook with fury so clean it made me nauseous. I didn't need to prove it. The shredder lived under the desk in my mother's room, left over from my father's old business days, and the waste bin beside. It was smeared with the same pink tissue. From the living room trash. I called the admissions office from the school library before first period. I told the woman on the line my name. I told her what happened in a voice that sounded steady and older than my age. She listened, then said she could not disclose admission decisions over the phone for privacy reasons, but she could resend notice via email if the email on file matched my own. It does, I said. It's Maya.Raman17 at. It appears we have Raman without the numbers, she said, typing. We can update it. You should receive an email within 24 hours. Can you tell me? I pressed my fingers into my palm until it hurt. If it's good news or bad news. She softened. I can't say that, I'm sorry. She lowered her voice a fraction. But I can say congratulations, Maya. On reaching this point, I hung up, walked to homeroom, and sat with my hands flat on the desk so they wouldn't betray me with their trembling. The school day is a strange machine when your future is a question mark. You can sit in class and absorb nothing. You can laugh when your friend Jules makes a joke about the principal's new haircut, and the laugh can come from the same body that feels like it's spiraling through space. At lunch, Samira floated past my table like perfume, her smile a slash. She leaned down as if to kiss my cheek and whispered, so lightly that Jules thought it was affection, nothing gold can stay. That night the email came at 8:17 p.m. I opened it at the kitchen table. My mother sat beside me with both hands folded as if in prayer. The subject line started with congratulations and the world made a small, neat sound. Like a note struck perfectly on a glass rim, I shouted and cried all at once. And my mother cried too. And somewhere in the house Samira's door stayed closed. Her music faint and steady as rain behind it. Samira swore she didn't touch the letter. She swore it in loops on her mother's name, on her grandmother's grave on the moon. When I told my mother about the shredded paper, Samira gasped as if she'd been struck. Do you hear her? She said to my mom, eyes wet. I can't believe she would accuse me. After everything, she said this last part with the perfect amount of tremor. Samira, my mother said quietly. Did you? I didn't, Samira said, lip wobbling. Maya just can't stand that other people can be happy for her without trying to steal her spotlight. Everything inside me wanted to throw the strips of paper in her face and watch the pink tissue pigment smear across her cheeks. Instead, I went to my room and cried into my pillow until the pillow had its own weather system. That night Jules called. You okay? She asked, voice pitched low, background noise of her siblings imitating a wildlife documentary. I got in, I said. I know, she said, drawing it out with joy. I knew you would, and Samira, my voice broke. I couldn't finish. Want me to come over with a shovel? Jules asked. I'm kidding, mostly we laughed. When I hung up, the laugh remained in the air and transformed into resolve. I didn't have a perfect plan. Revenge at 16 had always been the dramatic version. A public reveal, a gotcha moment, Samira's tears a kind of currency. Instead, what I had was a line from a poem stuck to the corkboard above my desk with a pin. To change your life, start immediately. Do it flamboyantly. No exceptions. I decided I wasn't going to try to trap Samira into confession. I wasn't going to compile my case and make my mother preside over it like a judge with a teacup. I was going to go to university and do the work and become someone who created her own doors. And somewhere along the line, I was going to find a way to hang my future where Samira would have to look at it every day. And the sight would be a mirror she couldn't block with her hand. Petty, maybe honest, absolutely. University was an hour train ride and a change of weather away. The campus smelled like pine and old books, like possibility in a wool coat. On the first day, A professor with silver hair and a sly smile, Dr. Ahmed, asked us to write down why we had chosen to study architecture. 1,000 answers circled in my head: practicality, prestige, a safe distance from the precariousness of my mother's finances. But what I wrote was, I want to make spaces where people breathe easier, where their shoulders drop without them noticing. Dr. Ahmed nodded at me kindly when I read it aloud, as if he understood that I was also writing about myself. In those first months, life split into strata. There were studios that bled into night, ink under my fingernails, models that fought me with foam and glue until they clicked into place with a little gasp. There were cheap dinners with Jules, who ended up at a different university but lived 2 subway stops away. She'd sprawl on my dorm bed and we'd compare roommates like alien species. There were calls home where my mother reported on Samira's latest hobbies: yoga for a week, photography for 2. A brief attempt at learning French that ended with her declaring the language too nasal. Every holiday, I went home, and Samira moved through the rooms with a practiced grace, always a step out of reach. Our girl, the big shot, she'd say with a controlled smile. Don't forget about us little people. I won't, I'd say, and she'd laugh like I told a joke. We became a pattern, the 2 of us orbiting one another, dangerous and steady. I didn't talk about the letter again. She didn't admit anything. My mother, exhausted by the quiet war, tried to create neutral zones, family dinners, movie nights, a habit of bringing me mango slices when I studied at the kitchen table. She loved us both in different ways and at different depths and with equal tenderness. It hurt to watch her try to pour from a cup that never felt full. Sophomore year, my mother got the cough. You know, the kind it starts like a tickle, becomes a rasp, then an echo you hear even when you're trying to listen to something else. The clinic said it was fine. The free clinic said to come back in 3 months. We lived in the gray area of medicine where things are only urgent when they're fatal. I added an extra shift at the library, learned how to stretch a chicken into 3 meals, and began to understand how architecture was about weight and balance not only in buildings but in life. Samira got a job at a boutique and lasted 3 weeks. She said the customers were rude and the hours were inhumane. She posted quotes about soft girls with hard hearts on Instagram. I did not plan revenge. I filed it, like a sketch you'll return to when you have the right materials. In my 4th year, Dr. Ahmed pulled me aside after a crit. Have you considered applying to the Urban Fellowship? He asked. You have a mind for context. You design with the city, not against it. I can't afford unpaid things, I said, because the fellowship was prestigious enough to be unpaid. And my pride was a thin coat over that fact. They're paid now, he said, amused. Thanks to agitation by those with minds like yours, I applied and got it. The fellowship placed me at a small firm that did community projects, libraries with generous windows, clinics with waiting rooms you actually wanted to wait in. I learned how to charm building inspectors and how to translate jargon into something a person could hold in their mouth and taste. I learned that the best place for a bench is sometimes where no one would have thought to put one. I graduated in a stiff cap and a robe that hung like borrowed authority. My mother came with Jules, both of them crying happy and proud. Samira sent a text at 10:03 a.m. Congrats. Boss lady with a winking emoji. At the reception, Dr. Ahmed hugged me and said, You're going to build something that lasts. I held those words like blueprints. 2 years later, I had my own practice, which sounds more glamorous than it was. I rented a narrow office above a copy shop, plants in the window to soften the glare, a wobbly AC unit that turned July into something survivable. My first clients were a community health nonprofit that wanted their clinic to feel like a place you went to be together, not to be processed. A couple who dreamed of turning a corner store into a cafe. And, improbably, a developer with a conscience who wanted to prioritize light and air over square footage bragging rights. Running the practice meant learning to be 3 people: the designer, the business person, and the therapist. The last one wasn't in the job description, but it turned out to be crucial. People needed someone to listen to their fear when money, materials, and dreams had to meet. I hired a part-time assistant, an older woman named Lotta whose hands were always warm and who could get more information out of a contractor with 2 questions. than I could with 10. We turned the office into a place. There were tiny cups for espresso, a crowded corkboard of gratitude postcards from clients whose spaces were finished, and a shelf of models that made the air feel busy with possibility. In the spring of my second year, I decided we needed a full-time receptionist and office manager, someone to wrangle schedules, greet clients, keep the admin from drowning the creative. Lotta wanted to scale back her hours to care for her grandson, and I needed someone who could smile and mean it. I put out a job listing that was earnest and perhaps a little idealistic. I was swamped with responses, people with experience in hospitality, in real estate offices, in design firms where the receptionist job was actually 10 jobs in a trench coat. A week into interviews, my mother called me at 10 on a Wednesday. "Samir's looking for work," she said cautiously, as if asking the question might detonate something in our past. "She asked me if you were hiring." I laughed, then caught myself. "Is this a trap?" "She's trying," my mother said. "She really is, this time. She's tried before." I said. "I know," my mother said, pain threading through her voice. "But if you had a place to try again, wouldn't you want it?" "Not for her," she corrected herself. "For yourself." I thought of the letter, the shredded fear, the way my mother had looked at me afterward as if torn between two halves of herself. I thought of the woman I had been when I made the silent promise to hang my future where Samira would have to see it daily. "Tell her to send her resume," I said. An email landed in my inbox an hour later. It was a decent resume. 1 year here, 2 months there. A course in digital marketing that had expired. Skills that were broad and real when combined, organized, compassionate, a calming presence. It was written in a voice that made an effort not to sound like Samira, formal, minimal, no glitter edges. When she came in for the interview, she wore a navy blouse and carried her hands like she didn't know where to put them. She looked older, not in a way that meant tired, but in a way that meant life had sanded down certain parts and sharpened others. Her eyes met mine and flicked away. "Thanks for seeing me," she said, and when our fingers brushed in the handshake, I remembered that she had always been warmer than I expected. We sat at the small round table near the window. She took in the office with a quick, trained glance elsewhere. She always scanned for exits and mirrors. Here, she looked at the models and the stack of client folders on the desk, and the photo of me, my mother, and Jules under a canopy of graduation caps. "So," I said. "So," she echoed, and smiled ruefully. "This is weird, right?" "A little," I said. "I could say all the usual interview things," she said, "but you know who I am, so maybe I shouldn't. You know the good and the bad." "I know some of it," I said. "People aren't fixed values," she exhaled. "I've been an idiot," she said, "about a lot of things." I waited, not trusting whatever came next. She took a breath. "About the letter." I held up a hand. "Don't," I said. The word surprised me with its softness. "We don't have to do this." "I need to," she said. Her eyes shone, not with tears but with the same stubbornness I recognized in myself. "It eats me. Every time I see your face. Every time Auntie puts your newsletter on the fridge. Every time I step near a mailbox." I looked at her. She didn't look like she was performing. She looked like she had come to the edge of a story and was ready to step off and see if the next chapter had solid ground. "I took it," she said simply. "I don't know why." "No, that's a lie. I know exactly why. I was jealous and scared and stupid. Everything came so easily to you, and..." She stopped herself and shook her head. "That's not even true. It didn't come easily. You worked yourself to the bone. But I couldn't see that then, because seeing it would mean I had to admit things about myself I didn't want to. So I did the easiest, cruelest thing I could think of. I threw it away and then I shredded it and then I lied to your face. And then I kept lying." Her voice stayed even. "I'm sorry. I wish I hadn't done it. I can't undo it, but I can say the words." The room was quiet. Outside, a bus sighed. A pigeon landed on the ledge, looked in as if evaluating the sincerity of our scene, and then moved on. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I'm tired," she said, with a laugh that was more like air leaving a balloon. "Of carrying it. Of trying to build a life on top of that lie, like a house with a cracked foundation." "I would have gone to university anyway," I said, oddly protective of my old resilience. "I called the admissions office and got the email." "I know," she said, relief and admiration running across her face like sun through curtains. "I should have known you would. But I wanted to. Samira, why did you apply here? I asked gently. She smiled crookedly. Because I saw those photos you posted of the clinic you designed and I thought, wow, a waiting room that doesn't make you want to climb out of your own skin. And then I thought, maybe she's building spaces where people can breathe, and maybe I could sit in one and learn how to do it myself. She looked up. And because I need a job. Do you want to be good at this? I asked. Yes, she said, and something in the words settled. No performance. Okay, I said. Here are the hours. Here's the salary. The work is a lot of small tasks done well. The work is smiles you don't always feel until you do. The work is being the first voice people hear when they're scared and the last when they're hopeful. You will mess up, and so will I, and we'll fix it. She grinned, too quickly, and then tempered it. You're offering me the job? I'm offering you a probationary period, I said. 3 months. And then we'll decide together. She nodded, humbled. I won't let you down. You will, I said, and we both laughed, surprised by the honesty. And we'll navigate it. She stood, and for a second we hovered. Then she did something I didn't expect. She put her hand on the table, steady, and said, thank you, Maya, for this and for not making me say everything you could make me say. Go home, I said, smiling. I'll email you the details. After she left, I sat in the quiet office with the morning light angling across the models. My stomach was a tighter knot than I'd admit. Forgiveness is not a switch. It's a door you open and leave ajar. A hallway you agree to walk again and again. I looked at the wall behind the reception desk and knew what I wanted there. Lotta. I called to the back room where she was labeling sample tiles. Do you remember that oversized frame the developer gifted us that we never used? The brass one. She called back. That's the one, I said. We're going to hang the most self-important thing I own right above the receptionist desk, your framed headshot. Lotta teased. Worse, I said. My degree, she cackled. Excellent. The next Monday, Samira arrived early, hair pulled back, a notebook in hand. Where do you want me? She asked. I gestured to the desk just inside the glass door, a simple blonde wood table with a vase of eucalyptus, a tray for mail, a computer monitor that was too big because it had been on sale. Above it, the brass frame gleamed. Inside it, my diploma, Bachelor of Architecture, with honors, my name tracking across the parchment like a bridge. Dr. Ahmed's scrawl in the corner alongside a seal that had been pressed so hard you could feel it like a scar if you ran your fingers over the page. Samira looked up and froze. She didn't flinch. She inhaled and held it, and then she let it out slowly. Her mouth did a small thing, not quite a smile, not quite a wince. This is new, she said. Figured it's nice to have, I said lightly. It looks good there, she said, steady. Like a boundary and a blessing. I blinked. A what? She laughed at herself. You know, like, this is who leads this place. So act right, and also, this place has earned its joy. I stared at her. She was different, I thought, and also not. People don't flip. They accumulate. Throughout that first week, she was what she promised, organized, kind, unflappable. She learned client names unprompted, offered tea without fuss, filed invoices with an efficiency that left me both grateful and a little threatened. When a contractor showed up late and belligerent, she touched his elbow lightly and said, "We're all doing our best, aren't we?" in a tone that smoothed the hackles right off him. Lotta watched her with approval. And you had to earn Lotta's approval the way some people earn their pilot's license. On Friday afternoon, when the light turned syrupy and the office felt like a living room we loved, a woman walked in with a harried look and a baby carrier at her hip. "I'm sorry," she said breathlessly. "I know I'm early, but my child and the bus." "No worries," Samir said. She came around the desk, offered the woman a seat, made a face at the baby that resulted in an immediate, delighted gurgle. "Is it okay if I hold them while you talk to Maya? Or we can take turns?" The woman's shoulders dropped like a weighted coat had slipped off. I watched from my office doorway as Samira rocked the baby and took notes, asked thoughtful questions about scheduling and noise during construction, about where the stroller would go when the clinic was full, when the client left. She set the carrier down again like a small promise and turned to me with an expression I remembered. Younger, unguarded. "I could have used a clinic like that when I was little," she said, almost to herself. "A place where you felt expected, not tolerated." I swallowed and found my voice. That's the plan, I said. We closed early that day to celebrate a signed contract. Jules met us at a dumpling place with red lanterns and tinny music. Over chili oil and vinegar, the three of us caught up and overlapped stories. Jules and Samira had a wary warmth. What they shared was me, and they were good to each other in that knowledge. On the walk home, Samira fell into step with me. Do you ever think about that day? She asked. She didn't say which day, but I didn't need her to. Sometimes, I said. I do, she said. When the mail comes, I think, you can't go back and send a different letter. She made a face. That sounds like one of those posters with a kitten. I smiled. I like kittens, I know, she said. We walked in silence. She added softly, thank you for the frame you noticed. I said dryly, I'm not oblivious, she said. It stings, but in a clean way. Like antiseptic. We crossed the street at the light, the city soft around us. And I understood that this was the shape forgiveness had taken. Not everything erased, but everything repurposed. There was one more chapter to write. Months later, the clinic opened. The waiting room had light that moved across the wall like a slow dance. The chairs had arms that didn't dig into you. The reception desk was low enough that an adult didn't have to stoop and a child could see over it. We installed a bookshelf at kid height with sturdy spines and a rotating selection of picture books. In one corner, we put an alcove bench that invited a nap. The morning of the opening, as we checked the final items, soap and dispensers, arched straight on the walls, Samira wandered to the receptionist's chair and sat. She tapped the bell once, a test note that delighted all of us like we were 12. Can I? She asked, and gestured as if to claim the desk for pretend. By all means, I said. I expect professionalism though. No doodling unless it's very good. She giggled, then sobered, hands on the smooth wood. A family came in, mother in a sari, two kids with scabbed knees, a grandfather with a cane. They hesitated. Hi, Samira said, warm, authoritative. You're in the right place. How can I help? The mother exhaled in the universal voice of relief. We didn't know if we had to fill something before we fill something, she said, embarrassed. Samira laughed gently. You're perfect. Here? She offered a form, but then, seeing the woman eyes the English warily, she added, if it's easier, we can do it together. The woman nodded. They bent their heads over the paper. The children discovered the bookshelf and the boy brought over a book with a dinosaur on the cover. Can I take this home? He asked. Bold, borrow it and bring it back next time, I said. We'll reserve it for you. He grinned broadly, revealing a gap in his smile like a missing brick. The grandfather wandered to the alcove and sat, his body melting into the curve as if he had been looking for that exact shape for years. I stood at the edge of the room and watched the clinic become itself, people moving like the building welcomed THM. This was the kind of space I had promised to make that first day in Dr. Ahmed's class. It wasn't fancy. It was exactly right. I turned to where Samira sat and felt a small shock, a déjà vu in reverse. She looked up at the wall behind the desk, and her gaze met the degree I had once wanted to weaponize. Her face was calm. She reached up as if to touch it and stopped just short. The way you pause before you place your hand on a sacred door. I like it here, she said when the line thinned. And she said it as if she wasn't just talking about the clinic. Me too, I said. A week later, I came into our office above the copy shop to find a tiny brown package on my desk. Inside, a gold picture hook, two small nails, and a note in Samira's handwriting, neat and careful, for your next degree. Or your first piece of art that isn't your name, or whatever you want to hang so you can see it all the time, and know you made it real. Underneath, in smaller letters, thank you for hiring me even though I didn't deserve it yet. I'm trying to. That autumn, we took on an after-school center project in our old neighborhood. When I brought the plans home for my mother to see, she cried a little and then made tea. You're building a world, she said, one room at a time. At the center's groundbreaking, they handed us shovels with ribbons and asked for a speech. I looked at the small crowd, kids who needed a place to do homework that wasn't a bus stop, parents who needed a safe hour, city officials in hard hats who loved cameras, and, standing at the edge of it all, Samira with her sleeves rolled, a clipboard in her hand like a shield she had earned. I told them our project aimed to make people feel expected, not tolerated. I said we'd listen first and design second. I said a room could hold more than furniture. It could hold grace. After As we stood amid the half-dug earth, Samira bumped her shoulder against mine. "You sounded like a person who reads poetry," she teased. "I am a person who reads poetry," I said. She grinned. "I know." She pointed up at a blank wall of the adjacent building. "Mural there." "Obviously," I said. "Any ideas?" She tilted her head, thinking. "A mailbox," she said finally, eyes sparkling with mischief I recognized and welcomed now. "But the mail is light," I laughed, startled at the perfection of it. "And the envelope floats toward a frame," she finished. "Above a desk. We didn't paint that literal mural. The kids wanted something with superheroes and scientists, but the idea lodged in me like a pebble polished by time. The way an object can change when you change. The way you can take a hurt and hold it up to the light until it throws colors. We never forgot the letter. We never spoke about it every day. On some nights, Samira came over with biryani and a story about a client who had cried when they saw their new design. And we'd watch TV and yell at the bad lighting choices on home renovation shows. On others, she missed a morning with a text that said sorry. Rough day, and I found a way to be both her boss and her cousin, which meant asking if she was okay and then telling her to take the afternoon off, and then telling her to remember timesheets. She paid my mother back in small ways: groceries, rides, attention. My mother's cough never became the sinister thing we feared. It became a note in the background we learned to tune around. When she met Samira's honesty with her own compromise, "You hurt my daughter," she said one night, and Samira said, "I know, Auntie, and I am hurting myself forward, so I get better at not hurting others." I realized that our house had always been a messy church without pews where confession and absolution were sewn into the carpet. 3 years after she started, Samira came to me with a portfolio, spreadsheets, testimonials from clients who praised her calm voice and crisp instructions, a plan to streamline our intake so people didn't get lost in the bureaucratic labyrinth. "I want to be operations manager," she said, not cocky, not timid. "I think I'm ready to make more things invisible in the best way." "You are," I said. And then, because I had learned that praise without numbers is soup without salt, I added a raise and a title on paper and a small ceremony with cupcakes where Lotta cried and scolded us for making her cry. On the day we installed the sign for our firm on the building facade, a clean font that made me feel like my heart wore a well-fitted jacket, Samira insisted on climbing the second ladder to help. Even though she had a mild fear of heights, she stared at the street below, then at me, fingers tight on the rung. "If I fall," she said, "frame my Starbucks gift card collection above my desk in my memory." I snorted. Noted. She didn't fall. We hung the sign straight and true. We stood on the sidewalk afterward, heads tilted up, and I felt the way I sometimes felt at the edge of the ocean, small in the right way, held by something larger. "Remember when I said keep your degree up there like a boundary and blessing?" She asked. "Yeah, you should put your next one in your office," she said. "You don't need to prove it to anyone anymore." I looked at the brass frame above the reception desk. The paper had begun to fade at the edges, a soft halo of time. It didn't sting to see it now. It didn't gloat either. It simply marked a passage. "I think it belongs there," I said. "It's become part of the furniture," she nodded. "Make sure it never becomes invisible." "I won't," I said. "I like seeing your face registering it every morning." She laughed, then grew thoughtful. "It's funny," she said. "You hung it to make me look." And I did. And then I kept looking. And then I saw you. I swallowed. "I saw you too," I said. Eventually, that night, when the office was empty and the models cast long shadows like a tiny skyline at dusk, I stood behind Samira's desk and read my name on the parchment again. I thought about the girl who had dug an empty envelope out of the trash and made a silent promise. I thought about the bus sighing. I thought about the way Samira had said prove it and how, in the end, the proof wasn't my degree but the space we had built together, where people felt expected when they walked in. There's a joy in revenge, I won't lie. But there's a deeper joy in transformation and turning a weapon into a landmark. A stain into a story we'd tell our interns when they asked about the frame. Oh, we'd say that's petty and profound. That's history and architecture. That's family. Sometimes, when the afternoon light is right, the glass over the degree throws a little flare onto the ceiling, a gold trapezoid of brightness. It looks like a portal to somewhere better. It reminds me of the first envelope, Of all the letters we receive and all the ones we write and all the ones we lose and still somehow piece together. It reminds me that once a girl opened her mailbox and found something that changed her life, and then, a long time later, a woman stood under a frame and felt her life settle into the shape she'd been designing all along. On those afternoons, I call Samira from the back and say, "Come look at this," and she rolls her eyes like I am being sentimental. And then she stands beside me and we look up. "Light," she says and tilts her head. "Mail home," I say. And we go back to work. The end.